Hello, everyone. We're live. Welcome to today's event. We're really excited to have you. Thank you so much for joining us this Wednesday. My name is Marta Chernova. I'm with the marketing team here at Epiphan Video, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. We'll be talking about how Microsoft was able to supercharge their hybrid event production, and we have a great panel of participants ready to answer your questions. I'm looking at Crowdcast where we're live. I'm seeing a lot of people saying hi. I'm seeing John Porterfield, Felix, Brad, Mike, Kurt, Marcos. Welcome. Feel free to use the chat. Let us know where you're watching from. This is great. We're also going live on LinkedIn. Our moderators are looking at both platforms. So if you have any questions, just drop that into chat or into the Q&A section on Crowdcast, and we'll be sure to get to all of those questions closest to the end. So I'll just give a few more minutes for people to filter in. I'm looking at those live participant numbers. Those are going up, which is great. Now, I know we want to get to the good part. I just have a few notes before we get started. So first of all, yes, this video will be available on demand after. Same URL as you have in your browser right now. On Crowdcast, you will notice some polls popping up every once in a while. Feel free to go ahead and weigh in on those. Again, use the Q&A section to ask your questions for any of our panel participants today. And also, we have a really special layer of interactivity planned for you today. You can call in and be a guest on our show and ask your question live. This is regardless of which platform you're watching from. We'll have a link available for you closer to the end, closer to the Q&A. Go to that link, join a Microsoft Teams meeting. Bam, you're going to be live. Don't worry, we won't plop you right in the middle of this production. We'll take you to a green room first. It's going to be great. So those are my housekeeping notes. Let's get to the good part. As I mentioned, we'll be hearing today from the experts who are involved with hybrid production at Microsoft. And to help me tell this story, I want to welcome my good friend, Nick Milani, who, among many other things, is also a workplace technology expert. Nick, welcome.
Hey, Marta, great to see you. Thanks for having me on today's call.
It's a pleasure. So, Nick, why don't you tell us a little bit about how today is going to be structured?
Yeah, so, one of the things we're trying to do is frame out this conversation in a way that's impactful for the folks that are joining and to think about these in general terms. And so what we've done is we've framed our guests out in kind of the role they play. And so today we'll be joined by the owner. That's the person that's brave enough to raise their hand, to suggest there's a different way of doing things and a new and more impactful way, than volunteers and wants to improve that experience. We'll talk to the producer. They're the person that ultimately has to make it happen, right? I always imagine it's like that scene in Apollo 13 where they dump all the parts on the table and they got to figure out how to make all these things work together and create an outcome. And then we'll be joined by the hero, as we're calling it. The hero is the person that's really the content owner, the person that wants to look good, feel good, sound great in those types of events. And in the case of this event, we've got an astronaut carrying on the Apollo kind of language. And so we're going to be hearing from the owner, the producers, and the heroes of these types of events and really breaking down how to make a world-class hybrid event.
That's right. And to demonstrate each role, we've brought together people from a recent GPS All Hands event at Microsoft. And we actually have a little video just to give you guys context into what that event looked like. So let's roll the tape.
Microsoft has always been a company that allowed you to work from anywhere and be your best from anywhere. And so video experiences have been a game changer for us. As a leader of the business, you want to have a certain brand image, you want to be very professional and really showcase what we can do as a company.
There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make sure that these events go off without a hitch. Epiphan Connect makes the broadcast and production experience much easier. It's a deep Teams integration that extracts the video and audio feeds from within a Teams meeting and pushes them to familiar live broadcasting tools. That means as a producer, you can focus more on the content that you're delivering. And for a participant, all you need to do is dial into a Teams meeting.
My heroes But it really was the Apollo moon landing that captured my imagination and made me start to dream about wanting to become an astronaut myself.
It really felt like you were watching a television show. It gave a little bit more production value. It really created that feel of something special, something better.
We've received nothing but positive feedback about Epiphan Connect. Our viewers are able to connect with our message, and we're able to deliver messages with confidence.
One of my colleagues turned to me and said that was the best virtual event that he has attended at Microsoft. He didn't have the context of what was happening behind the scenes. He just experienced an amazing event, which was pretty cool.
Fantastic. So you're going to recognize a lot of the people from that video today. But Nick, why don't we kick it off with the event owner?
Yeah, the event owner is the person that I talked about that raises their hand, right? So the person that volunteered to kind of step forward. In that case, it was Brody Langley, who's joining us today from his place in outside of Toronto, Canada. Brody, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, we saw the case study. Let's maybe just add a little context for what is a town hall at Microsoft and what does it mean to our audience that is the owner of that kind of event?
Yeah, so in this case, we were hosting one of our monthly Global Partner Solutions All Hands. So this happens once a month. It's an opportunity for us to get together, share critical business updates, celebrate milestones and awards on our team, and then showcase some of our partners and align on strategy for the month ahead. And one of the challenges is, you need to make sure the content in this 3-hour block is clear, concise, and engaging. This is consistent across all our events. And I want you to think about this at scale. We have thousands of both external and internal events. These are internal all hands like the one we hosted, external marketing events, announcements, technical enablement sessions. And, needless to say, events are really a big part of how we connect with our colleagues, partners, and customers. So this is a really big part of our business.
Well, I think that's really helpful for people to understand just how many of these events occur and what's required to pull something like this off, from the person that's going to volunteer, right? Like, what's this look like?
So I kind of think about this in two components. So on one side, you have the people and the content that need to come together. Those are your speakers and of course the content that they're presenting on, and then the technology, which is a combination of teams, and in this case, it was Epiphan Connect. With our all hands, the people and the content didn't really change. You still need to organize and brief the speakers, collect and organize your content. And then on the technology side, while we added that new technology layer in the form of Connect, the experience felt the exact same as any Teams meeting. So, in terms of what was consistent, what was different, for the most part, it felt the same, but we did have that enhancement layer. The investment in time, resources, energy, it's all the exact same. And the way I kind of think about this in my mind is what connected is it acted as a bit of a catalyst. It had this multiplying effect on everything else that we put into this. It kind of made that 1 + 1 = 3 equation. So same content, same technology, but better result.
Well, that's interesting, that idea of a catalyst and enhancer, right? And then I guess the next natural question is like, why aren't people already doing this? Like, what's new and unique about this, or why haven't people been approaching town halls this way all along?
Yeah, well, I think it comes down to just the fact that adding any new technology tends to add another layer of complexity. So you're dealing with the technical aptitude of the users and participants. Are they familiar with these tools? You have a large internal or external audience in which you need to show up well for. And so it's this risk reward equation. And typically, we tend to be risk averse, and we want to err on the side of caution going with something that's familiar. The beauty of this is it is familiar. It feels and acts the same as any other team meeting would, and you can really stick that landing without worrying about all the other variables, nuts and bolts that tend to go into adding that technology layer in.
That's a great point. And like, how does that contrast with past events for you and your colleagues? Like, how's that different?
Yeah, well, I think of this in kind of a few different eras of our live events. We had the pre-pandemic era where we designed events for the in-person experience, and then we allowed people to dial in, right, or virtually dial in through a bridge, and it wasn't really designed for those people who were remote. You know, they were kind of like these second-class citizens. And then you shift during the pandemic to 100% virtual. Everything is designed for the virtual experience, and people dialing in from different parts of the world, different parts of the country. And now we're emerging into this new era, which is hybrid. And in the case of our event, it was the very first hybrid all hands that we had hosted here in Canada. And so we needed something that allowed us to bridge that gap between the in-person era and the virtual era, while being inclusive of the people who were participating, the people who were viewing, and ensuring that everyone had a consistent experience regardless of where they were.
It was a great day, by the way. It was, participating and being there and having that in-person element, but also knowing that the remote folks were connected in and engaged. I hadn't framed it in my own mind as like the first real hybrid event, but it is in that sense. So that's my aha from this. What's your big aha? What's your takeaway? What do you like? What do you kind of reflect back on that's interesting for everybody that's listening in?
Yeah, well, I think you heard it in the case study. We had several folks who shared their feedback with us after the event, and many of them saying this was the best virtual event they had experienced in their decades with Microsoft. And that's a huge compliment. I mean, we host the technology that enables a component of this. The big aha moment for me, I think there were actually two or three. One was when we concluded the event and everything went off seamlessly, without a hitch. When
it's
again,
always
when
a
you
little
stick
scary,
that,
right?
yeah, I mean, you want to stick that landing, right? And then when you do, you're kind of like looking around and thinking, okay, we did that. And that was the first aha moment. And then the second aha moment was having the pleasure of watching it afterwards and seeing it from a remote viewer or participant's point of view. And so those were really the two moments where I realized, wow, this is simple. It enhances the experience for everyone involved, and it doesn't add that layer of complexity. And so that's really what inspired me, even after planning and delivering all of this.
Well, I think you capture it perfectly, and I really appreciate your support and willingness to raise your hand and kind of taking this journey together, which has been great. You'll join us later for the Q&A, so people can pepper you with their questions or their views, and you'll be available. But thanks again for joining today, Brody.
Yeah, my pleasure, Nick. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brody, for sharing the perspective of the event owner. So that's the idea behind removing a layer of technological complexity to make life easier for the event manager. Now, let's see if that resonates with the people behind the scenes, the producers who actually have to run around and, get the cameras, get the encoders ready. And to help me talk about that, I'm going to invite our very own seasoned producer, Dan Wallace. Welcome, Dan.
Hey, Marta, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for hopping on. I know you're actually producing this show behind the scenes. You're running all the layouts, you're doing the titling, so it must be hard. I won't take up too much of your time. But from what I understand, the process was quite similar to the way the All Hands event was produced at Microsoft. So why don't you give us a little overview of what's happening behind the scenes right now?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So why don't I just kind of pull back the curtain a little bit? I promised everyone I would reveal the secret weapon to how Microsoft pulled off their hybrid event. So why don't I show you how I'm doing this right now? And I've got a little behind the scenes camera here so you can see I'm actually just in my home office and I'm running this whole production right in my web browser. And as you can see, I've got a couple tabs open here, but I'll kind of walk you through what I'm doing. So right here in the center, I've got sort of a live switcher, which is the template for my event. I've sort of configured everything in advance and I can switch through all of the scenes as we progress through the run of show. I'm using Epiphan Unify to do the switching for this event, but you could use any broadcast switching tool you prefer. So some people use hardware. Epiphan makes a great device called the Pearl, which kind of creates your own little hardware dedicated studio to do this kind of thing. But many folks might use tools like OBS, which is free software, or vMix. There's a lot of ways you can do this. Grass Valley is another big name for doing sort of that broadcast production. But sort of the big challenge in the past is how do you get all of your participants into that switching tool?
Yeah, that's what the people want to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So the secret to that has been Epiphan Connect. And Epiphan Connect really bridges the gap between the convenience of video conferencing and the quality of full motion broadcast video. So if you see over here on the left side of my screen, I'm actually just running a Teams call in the background. And I have all the participants who are going to be joining this show just in the Teams call hanging out. They're not in the show unless I switch to them, but I can extract them from this Teams call and bring them into my production very easily. Why don't I show you a little bit more about how I'm doing that? I'm going to share my screen. Just going to switch to a screen share. Okay, now you should be able to see my switcher. I've got all my layouts prepared in advance and I progress through them. But under the hood here, I'm going to show you the Epiphan Connect dashboard. Here in Epiphan Connect, I've got all my Teams meetings, and I've got a few different meetings going on. But let's look into this meeting. I can see all the participants who are in this meeting. And this is like a direct integration with Microsoft Teams. So it makes it really easy to see all the sources that I have available to me for my production. Down here, I can see you, Marta. I'm extracting your audio and video, isolated audio and video from Teams and bringing them in. I can see that I'm connected. The connection looks good. I can actually open up and see a few different sort of technicals and stats about what quality of video I'm pulling. If I wanted to play around a bit, I could turn your camera off. I could turn your camera back on very easily. I'm in full control here with Epiphan Connect. Furthermore, like if I want to start extracting another guest, I can simply click the start button, and then I have some options of where I want to send that extraction. For the technical folks, you might be familiar with SRT, Secure Reliable Transport. I can use that. Or if you're using Epiphan hardware, like an Epiphan Pearl, I can directly pair my Teams sources into my Epiphan device. And here I can see all my Epiphan hardware. And I can also see my Epiphan Unify, which is like our cloud switching tool. I can see that webinar project right here as well. So a lot of options for, if you want to get into the details of the technical aspect of all this, but the biggest takeaway is that it's just super easy. It's as simple as clicking start, and then you're extracting sources right from Microsoft Teams.
And you're saying you can do all of this from home, like you don't even need to be on site to do any of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the Microsoft event, our colleague Jeremy Prudhomme was actually switching that event from Amman, Jordan. So he's like over a continent away. So the really cool thing here is like the latency is so low, and that's what we've come to expect with video conferencing: low latency, immediate connection. That hasn't always been the case with broadcast. So being able to take sort of the advantages of video conferencing and port that over into broadcast video, it's really huge, and it's really been sort of bridging the gap. It's been the missing link. So it's great. Yeah. And I hope everyone's enjoying the show.
Yeah. And in case people are wondering how we're planning to bring on live guests later on, this is the answer. This is how. So Dan, I know you have a lot of experience with this. You mentioned Jeremy. I think you got a chance to talk to him and the other producers involved in the Microsoft event.
Yeah, so I had a chance to catch up with a couple different folks who are involved in the Microsoft event. Right off the top, we had Joe Drake, and he is the AV and IT technical consultant that was working with Microsoft for that event. And he's done a lot of events with Microsoft, and he kind of comes from a live events background. And then we also have Jeremy Prudhomme, who's a video producer, and he was kind of in my role right now. He was in that role for Microsoft. So why don't I play back? I've got a little video here that just gives some context to their perspectives of operating a hybrid event. So we could take a look at that now.
Let's roll it.
some of the pain points, the biggest pain points that you're seeing right now?
Well, I think a lot of heroes came out of the pandemic. That guy that can kind of wrangle a bunch of people on a Teams meeting, get the content sorted, and make sure that you bounce from person to person the right way. However, we're moving past that now, and those people just don't have the bandwidth to do that kind of thing anymore. And people are still expecting the same kind of result. Without having that expertise in the room or the additional hardware, there's a confluence of expectations that everybody seems to have. And then you have to be the technical guy that walks in a room and says, that's a $10,000 show. You have a $2,000 budget. I'm sorry, guys. More importantly, I think the knowledge gap is widening very fast. The amount that you need to know about network infrastructure in order to do a basic AV job now has skyrocketed. People are returning to the industry and they're going, what has happened while I've been gone? Hybrid has done a lot.
In the past, you would have, you might have an AV company depending on the size of your whole production. And then you would have the video production company or the video producer that would, be in the room and produce everything. And then you would have multiple laptops to create these feeds coming in for each guest. Now, you just need one producer and then you bring in everything from Connect. And it makes it really, really simple and really easy for everybody to do it now.
What's cool about Epiphan is you actually don't need somebody like me or a professional producer or a graphic designer or a post-production specialist to do your back-end stuff. You can have somebody with an interest who just wants to make their weekly manager meetings cool. The possibilities are endless. I think production quality is going to have its own renaissance.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for putting that together for us, Dan. Thank you. I'm going to let you get back to producing the show. I know it's a challenge to do both things at the same time.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
All right. Okay, so we actually have Joe and Jeremy waiting in the wings. They're going to be here for the Q&A portion. So if you have any questions for our producers, please put those into chat on LinkedIn or into the Q&A section on the Crowdcast. And better yet, you can call in live and ask your question live. Right about now, you're going to see up on the screen a URL, epiphan.com/live. Go to that URL, you'll see a button. You're going to be joining a Microsoft Teams green room. We won't throw you right into the production right away, we promise. And our producers are going to take real good care of you, tell you the instructions, tell you what to do. So if you have a question, go ahead and check that your camera and microphone are working correctly. And right now is the perfect time to come up with that question because this is the guest we've all been waiting for. This is the part where we're going to be talking about the experience of the talent of the participant, right? So for them, having an easy experience joining and delivering their message is really important too. And to help me talk about that, I would like to invite one of the key guests of the event, the star of the show. He's a business coach, he's a seasoned keynote speaker, and he's a former NASA astronaut and International Space Station commander, Dr. Leroy Chiao. Welcome, Dr. Chiao.
Oh, thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to have you with us. So, Nick, I'm going to throw it over to you to walk us through the talent experience.
Great to see you again, Dr. Chiao. It was fun that day of watching that case study again. It's fun to reflect on the kind of the performance and the different aspects that we were pulling together, and certainly appreciated your support as kind of that content person, that keynote. And maybe you can just start there, like help the audience understand the importance and impact a keynote speaker like yourself can have on delivering a message.
Sure. Having a keynote for an event or as part of the organization is to have somebody to inspire and get the folks excited. And of course, the keynote also is able to communicate the values and the main points of the meeting. And so having the right person as part of your keynote is crucial in that you can get everybody fired up, but also at the same time deliver the message that is desired and to do it all smoothly and in a fun and in some cases entertaining way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things from our perspective that's so great about a keynote is that you get an associative property, right? Folks that joined that town hall will remember that an astronaut joined and shared these incredible stories. They may not remember who Epiphan is, but they'll remember that we're the ones that brought you with us, right? And so I think there's this associative part that also comes in that idea of trying to connect back to an audience and really share a story or an outcome. I'm guessing you've joined millions of these things over the years, both in person. One of the things I love Brody frames out is kind of that pre-pandemic in-person thing versus virtually. And maybe you can just kind of share a little bit of your observations and experiences throughout that time.
Absolutely. I mean, having everything prepared and go smoothly is the goal. And of course, for the keynote and to come up to a stage or do it virtually, if everything's prepared, if it's really well done and visually appealing, the sound is working, the video is working, or in the case of a live event, your microphones, the lighting's all right, and then it's easy to do, right? Then I can get on stage or get in front of the camera and really deliver my message and hopefully have an impact on the audience. So, the key is in the production and the preparation, making sure the technology is going to work. If there's a little glitch, that's okay. We can kind of keep going and work around it. And that's certainly happened in my career a few times. But, it's a little bit disruptive and people get a little bit, out of sync. But then we can kind of recover. But if everything goes smoothly, that's the best.
Well, I love that. And I think it gives people that focus on content and people, right? I mean, Brody broke down the technology side and then the content people side. And I guess right now we're running some of the B-roll footage from that day of your keynote with some of your just incredible imagery and photography from the International Space Station. I'll just ask you to kind of respond as you're looking at it here inside of Teams. Like, how does it make you feel? How do you think we reflected your brand and your kind of mission?
I think it was very well done. I mean, looking at the footage, it's all the things that I mentioned were there, right? And everything went really well, and that's what makes you feel good, both as a presenter and then later getting the feedback from the audience that they really enjoyed it because it did go off so smoothly, and not just because of the story I had to tell, but because it would, the technology and everything else we talked about synced up together, and it all worked great.
Well, I think it did work out great, and I know one of the things just having done live events throughout my life too is that there's always this stress, this pressure, right? And this idea of delivering and will it go right? Will there be problems? We heard from Jeremy and Joe earlier, their producers. Dan's in the background right now, feverishly making the magic happen. What kind of a story can you share about stress and overcoming kind of adversity as an astronaut that might help provide perspective to all of us that feel this constant, fear of failure, so to speak?
Oh, sure. No, it's really the same thing. I mean, there's a stress of putting the show together. I can certainly understand that. I've never done it myself, but it's all hanging on just one or two people to make sure that everything works, right? And it does go smoothly. So one particular time I can tell you about as an astronaut, we were approaching the International Space Station in our Soyuz spacecraft, and we were within 200 meters of the station when we had a failure in the autopilot, and all the alarms went off, and red lights are flashing. And this usually only happens during training in the simulator, right, when they're always trying to kill you. But on flight day, usually everything's quiet, and there are no malfunctions, no serious malfunctions. Well, in this time there was. We were very close to the station, and the autopilot, instead of slowing us down as we got closer, started speeding us up, and also started a left yaw maneuver. And so we started losing visual sight of the station. So very dangerous situation. We could have easily collided with the station, which would have been probably certainly catastrophic for us, but also could have put a hole in the station and been catastrophic for the crew on board. Fortunately, we were well trained for this. This kind of event, and we had our emergency books out. We did all the things we were supposed to do. We took manual control, and we got the ship stopped 50 meters from the station, and then got the approval to go in and do a manual docking at night to the station. So it's the kind of thing that similar to, well, just about anything where, a lot of people are depending on you. And in this case, it was a little bit of a life and death situation, but it doesn't diminish the stress that people who produce shows and produce these kinds of events feel, because it is all hanging on you. And a lot of people are going to be let down if you don't get it done right. But stress, whether it's during space flight or producing a show or anything else, it's very real. And hopefully you kind of rehearsed and you're trained, you know how to deal with it and bring it to a good conclusion.
Well, I love that. Thank you for sharing. Just incredible. And I think the thing that you come back to is the teamwork, the training, getting back to like the checklist and how everybody functions. And I think there's an element of that we're learning in this live event space of making things more repetitive, having tools that everyone can kind of plug in and know their role and support each other. Because it certainly is about that. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, well, I don't want to stay in between us and more questions for you. I really appreciate you joining. I'll bring Marta back and we'll keep moving on here.
Yeah, Leroy, thank you so much for that story. Talk about intense. I don't know what I would have done in that situation, but that's probably why I'm not an astronaut. So if anyone else has any other questions for Leroy, please pop those into chat. Leroy's been really generous with his time, so we're going to fire through questions for him first, and then we're going to move on to all the other questions. So let's do a quick recap of what we talked about today. So we demonstrated the different roles that are involved in producing a hybrid event. We talked about the event owner, the producers, the talent, and we talked about the overall idea of just simplifying life for all of them through the use of technology. And now we can open up the discussion to everyone, sort of have a little round table and move on to the questions. So once again, if you guys want to join live, epiphan.com/live, click the button, join us as a guest. So why don't we ask some questions? I'm looking at our question list here. So, okay, here's a question for Leroy. What are your biggest challenges as a remote guest, as joining as a remote guest?
As a remote guest, as you know, we want to try to have as impactful of an experience for the audience as possible, and so it's difficult to recreate that virtually, right? I mean, when you get up on a stage, everyone's excited. You can feel the energy of the rest of your peers in the audience, and so it kind of builds on that. So the challenge in doing a remote or an event where I'm in front of a camera is trying to have that same impact, and it helps a lot when all the things that we talked about previously, everything that's done smoothly. The visuals are very nice and crisp and attractive. The lighting's good. Microphone and the sound are good. Everything goes off without a hitch. That certainly helps. And it's a little bit of a challenge for me as the speaker or the presenters because I'm not reading the audience. I don't get to see the real-time feedback that I would get if I were on a stage and live. But however, it's something that during the pandemic we all learned how to deal with, and so it's not a showstopper by any means. Not a big deal. But I just assume that everyone's having a good time.
Do you have an example of like a really terrible joining experience that went totally wrong, and maybe an easy one just to contrast that?
Sure. No, I mean, and I don't have a specific example for that, but I've had virtual events where there's been tech problems. Where the connection not on my side, but on the other side went down, or the videos weren't playing right and they were being distorted on the. I was interrupted saying, hey, the videos aren't playing right, or there's a little sound problem, and so we can adjust. Of course, we do adjust in real time, and if we can't get it fixed, then I'll just say, okay, well, I'm just not going to play that video and kind of keep going, right? So those are the ones that don't go as smoothly, but thankfully, and those are pretty rare. That really doesn't happen very often. Technology is pretty good these days. The ones that go best, that's the majority of the time. Just like the one Microsoft event we had earlier, more recently, where everything just kind of was very crisp. The visuals were great. The technology worked, and everything went off perfectly.
Fantastic. Thank you. Nick, do we have any other questions for Leroy, or should we hop on to the other questions?
I think it's always interesting about joining these events, right? Because I think there is a fear of the technology getting in the way. One of the things we're trying to test with this event is to bring in live guests, and that's something that I know is there's an analog to radio, the good old days of radio, right? Where we used to be able to join into a sports talk show and join and participate. And we're trying to run that now. And it's interesting to see that, how people are kind of afraid sometimes. They're afraid to like raise their hand, they're afraid to step forward. And I think a lot of times, going back to what Brody said earlier, it's the technology getting in the way of it. It's because people are fearful of those challenges they might face. And so as we continue to remove those barriers of technology, I think it's an opportunity for us. And Leroy, I hear a little bit of that in your kind of comments about joining these. And for you and your kind of as a professional keynote speaker, like the ease of your ability to get into these things and share your story, ultimately makes your days a lot easier, right? Your life a
Oh,
lot better.
absolutely. Sure. Yeah, you bet. Yeah.
So, if somebody's out there that wants to try to join us on the call, try to join us in. If you don't, we'll keep moving on to the rest of the panel and let Leroy enjoy the rest of his day. Again, I think it's really appreciate you being here and joining us and providing your perspective on what it means to join events and the importance of it.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure. And, today, as usual, for an Epiphan and Microsoft event, it seems to have run perfectly. And so it's my pleasure to join.
Well, thanks so
Thank
much,
you so
Leroy.
much. Thank you so much, Leroy. We encourage you to join us live. Come on, guys! We're really excited to try this out because it really is an easy joining experience, and we really want you guys to experience that for yourself. But let's, for now, jump to some more of the questions that came through chat. So here's a question for Brody. If using a contractor, what access/privileges/changes does a corporate need to allow to manage their event for them using the team's infrastructure?
Yeah, so it depends. If you're in person, in our case, we were actually just joining as myself as kind of that kind of IT gateway, if you will. But I believe as a guest, it's just and maybe I can actually defer to Nick on this. He may know the technical components on the Connect side a little bit better than I do. But I believe you can just be a kind of a guest or be provisioned access by your organization.
Yep, it's as simple as that. And one of the features we've added to Connect over the last 6 months is we've added a Meet Now function. And so for folks that haven't been able to pair their Microsoft Teams tenant in the background, but still want to leverage Microsoft Teams as that green room, as that communications tool that we're all talking to each other in right now in the background, which is super accessible and easy to connect to, then they can use that Meet Now functionality to send out the invite. So we give a lot of options on how to connect with different guests. But ultimately, for the people joining, they don't have to have anything special. They can join from their phone, join from their laptop, join from a room.
Yeah,
Great.
one thing that I thought was really cool there is the fact that this is like a Microsoft Teams room that's joining into the Epiphan backend. It's not which means that it has the entire backbone of that Microsoft Teams room built into it. You have the full the latest greatest microphones that are in the ceiling, the reliable bandwidth of the infrastructure of the company that you're working for on site there, as well as the full host of Microsoft standards for what they want to do for a modern conference room. And that just like ports seamlessly into the Epiphan Connect as a backend person, just like I am now here in my normal studio.
Yeah, one of the aspects of that Teams room that you touch on, Joe, and for the folks that joined us, like we're all kind of joining from PC-based setups right now, right? Everyone's in their respective studios, so to speak. But during the event, I actually joined from the Teams room there on site, and I call it a band show. Brody, how do you describe that room that had the movable walls in it?
Yeah, it was just one of our conference rooms, right? It had Microsoft
space.
Teams rooms. Yeah, it had all the hardware, Teams loaded up.
One of the things I loved about that space was that we were able to just leverage that existing Teams room infrastructure for all of our audio and video feeds. So, those rooms, for anybody that's out there that's on the AV side, that those divisible conference rooms have really advanced audio systems in them to share the audio out and to gain microphones in. And as I recall, we were able to leverage that infrastructure pretty easily. Like, I don't know, Joe, if that's that. As I recall, the day of when we were doing our walkthrough, that was one of those like aha moments. It was like, oh wait, we can just use the existing stuff. We don't have to bring in a bunch of tech.
It's crazy. I mean, because because at that point you're completely elevating your user experience, and you're also providing an in-person experience to, I don't know, however many people were in that room, 90 people, 80, 100 people. So you're doubling, tripling your audience depending on how many people you're sending it out to, while providing the only difference when you're using Epiphan Connect with a Microsoft Teams room versus what we're doing kind of now, where everybody's at home, is the way that you treat the green room, right? Like right now, we're in a back green room here. At any point, the producer can jump in and talk to us and give us some direction. However, when you're using a Microsoft Teams room, the Teams room needs to be in that back end, and the back end experience needs to be curated for the people that are in person in that Teams room, which is easily solved just by having a second call on the other side, and then that's where you do all your production stuff. But the value add there with the use of the full Microsoft Teams room system is beyond compare.
Yeah, and it's interesting because what you're describing by having that room experience for them, for the audience's sake, right, we've got a backfeed of what you guys are seeing right now on Crowdcast or LinkedIn. So we see what you're all seeing out there. What this does in a really hybrid space, like Brody was describing before, like when we're actual hybrid event, we're not making it for the people on site or for the virtual. We're making it for blended. I want on-site people and virtual people. That back channel lets the people in the room see what the outside, what the remote folks are participating and experiencing. It gives them that enriched content as well, especially when the content's not originating from the room, right? Because if the speaker's in the room, everybody in the room switched on. But when Dr. Chiao was doing his keynote from his home in Houston area, like now all of a sudden the people in the room could be at a disadvantage if they're not getting that program feedback in. But we were able to bring that feedback in and provide that kind of enriched experience.
Fantastic. I really like how the panel is jumping in. That was great. If anyone has anything to add, just feel free to go ahead and jump in. And I think we have a live caller, if I'm not mistaken.
I love
it. Oh, we're working on it. We're sending him across, so this is exciting. I hope you guys are ready. So we are about to be joined by Matt Boyer, and he has a question for Jeremy/Brody, and he is about to appear right about now.
So Marta's done the intro for Matt here. We got to give him a few seconds to make the transition.
That's right. Yeah, I am
catch up to us. And the thing that we're all figuring out here is how to get that engagement so that we can have these real conversations with real folks. And Matt, I see you there. And so
I can hear our producer whispering that we're working on it. This is the test that I was talking about, the test for Dan. Dan is working overtime right now, and he's he's just trying to get everything perfect. Fantastic. There we go. Matt, welcome. Thank you so much for joining.
How you guys doing?
Great to have you.
So my question was had to do with chat. Is there a way to I can understand, like in a larger all hands kind of meeting, you'd have a separate person wrangling the chat. But for maybe less formal meetings, or maybe you want to have more of an online engagement with chat, is there a way to bring the Teams chat or chat bubbles, for example, up into the production as well?
Yeah, maybe I can answer that. In our case, we were using a Teams Live meeting, so we were able to use all of the native functionality that exists within Teams Live in this one in particular. So that includes your chat functionality, your Q&A function. Now, if this was a smaller, more intimate, say internal all hands, what you could also do is leverage kind of a separate Teams chat, separate from the green room. So there are some options there. In our case, we were using Teams Live.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think part of what you want to choose when you're doing that, Matt, is like it's about manageability. It kind of goes back to what Dr. Choi was talking about, this idea of can everybody put hands on controls when things get stressful? And sometimes it's a balancing. And one of the things we're trying here is we're doing multiple services. So we've got LinkedIn and Crowdcast, whereas The event that we did with Microsoft was a single kind of live event outbound, and so you can architect it different ways. Do you have a preferred methodology? Do you have something that you've seen working well in the past or doesn't work?
No, I'm just curious. I've been doing some, looking more at like Microsoft Front Row and the way they've reoriented the graphical interface there to make a more, equity, for meetings, bringing the chat window to the front. It just made me think about how people can, sometimes it's interesting to see what's going on in the chat in a situation like this that's being rebroadcast. So that was really where I was coming from. Did a little follow-up technical question. As far as bringing in people and bringing them into the room, what kind of capabilities do you have to manage their audio as far as controlling levels and things like that? Sometimes, I think you mentioned this earlier, looking good on the camera, having your audio levels set properly. What can the production, person do to compensate for some of those issues?
Yeah, I think the first thing is the cool thing about the Connect system is that you do have access to mute and unmute the mic through Connect and not from Teams. So the producer can still talk to me, but we could mute him in the Connect system. Now, for the audio output to control the audio, I don't think we have. Do we have anything, Nick, right now? On our side?
That's something that gets handled within the production tool typically, Matt. So depending upon what your tool of choice there is, you can get some controls over it.
Very good. Well, thanks for taking the time to answer my questions.
Hey, thanks for joining, Matt. Appreciate
Thank you so
having
much for joining.
courage.
Just a quick comment on, tell us about the joining experience. How was that for you? Gosh, no, he's still here. He's still here.
I'm still here. Yeah. That was pretty smooth. Just had to reopen Windows or open Teams, from one room to the other. I don't know if using the little breakout rooms within Teams would make that experience easier. I had to open another session, but it wasn't difficult.
Good. Well, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you for paving the way for everyone else. Thank you for being brave enough to join. Take care. All right, so let's hop on to some questions for the producers. This is going to be a question for Jeremy or Joe. Is this solution, the Microsoft hybrid event solution, is it a hardware solution, software, or combined? How did you put it together with Joe and the team? So this is a question for Jeremy.
So it's I guess for the Microsoft events, right? I guess it's a combined production, right? And what we did is, I think, Joe, you can talk about a bit more about what was in the room, but on my hand, I was just getting some SRT feed that we took from Pearls, if I'm not mistaken. And so we sent SRT feed to the cloud software that we're using today, the unified cloud software, but you could use vMix, OBS, or whatever you choose to use, right? And then we had Teams open, and then we just did most of our remote guests through Connect, and then sending those guests to our remote software, or cloud software, Unify. So that's how kind of we did the production.
Yeah, so one clarification, by the way, Joe, you remember what a pain in the ass it would have been to get a Pearl onto the Microsoft network?
No, it would not happen. It would not happen. The Microsoft network is too secure to allow for that.
So we didn't have any Pearls in the production, Jeremy. Those were all laptops. We were doing with capture cards into laptops, and effectively the laptop was acting as the encoder back through Microsoft Teams.
And the main Microsoft Teams room system would have been an HP Slice, and that would have been handling the broadcast from the Teams room itself. I mean, this was the full multi-purpose room, like with an integrated Microsoft Teams room system, Extron control system, Panasonic cameras, the new Biamp fancy ceiling mics that are really great, the T220s. All of that integrated, and then via USB connections hitting the Teams encoder and sending that SRT virtual machine technology out to Epiphan Connect, and then it's just and then at that point the producer gets the isolated feeds and they can push it out however they want. So it is that combined cloud and hardware solution for this specific event.
So I think an easy way for our audience members to think about it is that if you're looking to turn a space into a studio, Pearls are perfect for it, right? If you want to have a studio. In this case, we were leveraging Microsoft's infrastructure, and they had Teams room. They didn't have studios in place. They had Teams rooms in place. So we were able to leverage that infrastructure then for both the remote participants, but also for kind of the local participants, and kind of turning those Teams rooms into studios. And so it just gives you flexibility of different options. But if you have an existing Pearl in your studio, boy, is it easy to bring in folks like we're doing today and bring in remote guests.
Great. Hopefully that answers that question. And we actually have another live caller with us, Steve Wonder. Welcome to the show.
Hey there, folks. Steve Wonder with Wayne House Research here. Congratulations on the live event here. Very cool how you're able to pull in questioners like me. I was wondering if you could walk me through the pre-event development process. You have a whole ton of different thumbnail templates of what you can throw on the screen. How much work goes into making that all happen ahead of time in terms of the time needed to do pre-event production work?
Yeah, I think it can be done very quick. I mean, for us right now, because we're so used to it. So I mean, we could do it in a day because we have templates and all that stuff. Right now, we're using Unify, so the cloud system, which is very similar to what a Pearl would look like. So we can input videos in there, we can input pictures or what so, and then we create layouts. So after you've created your layouts, it's very quick to copy and paste them, and then on the day of, it takes maybe an hour to get ready if you're kind of used to it. And then for graphics, I don't know I think we're using maybe Flowix today. But basically, we're using Flowix, an external software for graphics, and that can take longer to create your presets. But after it's done, it's very quick to get going and get started. Yeah, I think it's very simple at the end of the day to copy your events and make them kind of look the same and get going super quick.
Yeah, I think that one important thing in terms of content creation is always to have theme and variation on the screen, and the thumbnails that you folks generate here allows you to be that producer that goes from a 1-shot to a 2-shot to a 3-shot and keeps it a lively, engaging viewing experience. So it's good to see what you're bringing to the feature set here.
Thanks, Steve. I think Brody framed it out really well around the technology and then the content and the people. And one of the things that you have to also address is that the content takes planning, right? I mean, bringing an astronaut on, bringing in 2 producers, bringing in Brody as a subject matter expert, organizing Marta and myself, like that's part of that content and people success metric. And from my perspective, it's a good run of show. It's organizing what the kind of guiding principles and the objectives of the message are and what that kind of flow is. And then, people show up, and if it's easy for them to connect and they're not stressed out, they tend to sound pretty smart. I don't know, Brody, if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think as the person who put their hand up to put on an event like this, you of course want everything to look polished and refined. And I think the beauty of bringing in different presenters and combining that with these canned layouts and things that you can do in that kind of let's call it that pre-production phase is everything looks branded. So when Leroy's presenting his slides and his pictures and content, it fits within this container that's already branded for what we're delivering. And so if you have an external guest, you have internal guests, you have this continuity, which just gives it that enhanced kind of polished feel.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, it's also great to be a remote producer, remote director. Not being in the room gives you time to really concentrate on what's important, the content, the guest, the remote guest, and that really does it, right? Like, it's just it's like you don't have to think about what's happening in the room, and it really gives space to make the content a little bit better.
Well, for creative producers, it certainly does offer the opportunity to be the creator of a much more interactive, engaging experience. Usually get to this point of the webinar and you're doing a bunch of text-based questions and that's about it. When you're able to bring in presenters live and again introduce that theme and variation, a different voice, a different look, it just improves the engagement quotient at a time when you get to the end of a session, when you really need a little juice to keep those viewers tuned in.
For sure.
And that's I think, just to comment on that, Steve, I mean, that's the hybrid experience, right? You want your live in-person experience to be replicated virtually and online. And although, you're not in the room with me today, I do feel as though we're able to interact and engage more than we otherwise would, kind of in the world of yesterday before we had something like Connect.
Well, congrats on the on the rollout here.
Thanks for joining.
Fantastic. Yeah, Steve, thank you for hopping on. All right, let's move on to some more text questions. Nick, here's a question for you. Yep. What is the best way to introduce live guests? How would you best use a green room with Connect and Teams?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm a big believer in transitions. I think that when we try to script content for people, it stresses them out. So my personal best practice is to focus on that transition and that introduction. There's two things that I'm trying to do in the introduction. One is to prep the person that they're about to be on camera so they can speak and they can get themselves ready. The second thing is to kind of cue them up as the context as to why they're there. And that one of the things that happens over these hour-long journeys is we want to create a narrative, a thread that's maintained throughout, so folks kind of know where they're at in the journey, both as a presenter and as a participant. It just makes us feel more connected to the storytelling. So that's kind of a long-winded way of the approach that I take. Now, how do we use a green room for this space? Well, we're all joining this Teams meeting 15 minutes early. We're talking top to bottom through the run of show. Marta's going to do introduction. We'll run the case study video. Brody will come in. We'll ask the 5 questions we've agreed to. We'll bring in the pre-record with Dan and Marta, and then we'll bring in Dr. Chiao as the astronaut and move to Q&A. And so we just kind of continue to reinforce that at the beginning, and then throughout the event. Right now, we're using a return feed back into the team so that we kind of use that as a guidepost, right? We know where we're at in that journey. Maybe for the guests, I mean, how does that fit your perspective of this? It's, does that resonate? You guys have any other points on it? Silence is bliss.
Well, we do have a really popular question that people seem to be asking. This is probably for Brody. As a remote guest, what do you see in your teams? I'm guessing the way it's asked, what do you see in his teams? So, Brody, can you describe what you see in your teams as a participant?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that this refers to kind of the Teams interface, and what it looks like for me, I'm looking at it right now, is any other Teams meeting that you would dial into. So you have your square and a grid. The difference is your individual square and audio are extracted, and that's what we're able to do the production with. So it looks and feels exactly like any other Teams meeting. I have the same other interface components. And us in the green room here, we can chat. I can mute my microphone, shut my video on and off, share emojis, whatever that may be. So it's the exact same Teams experience that you'd be used to. I hope I'm understanding that question correctly. If not, drop it in the chat and please let us know.
One of the things that the whole SRT extraction aspect really brings to this is kind of a missing piece that's not in Teams Live as it is right now. So using Teams Live not being broadcasted to as an RTMP stream, but actually using the native functionality inside of the app. The green room, so to speak, that we're in right now would be all audio from any audio that happens in this back green room would be sent live to that Teams Live, which was the standard practice for most base level internal meetings at Microsoft. and then using this Epiphan, the SRT extraction, so that the producers on the other end get that muting and unmuting experience, is invaluable, as well as being able to see the real-time bit rate of the incoming video of each of the participants and being able to react and produce as needed based on how those changes happen. Super invaluable as a producer. It's one of the reasons that I fell in love with Epiphan immediately.
Yeah, as a producer, it's so great because it used to be audio used to be a mess coming in from different laptops. Also, shared screen used to be a mess. Now the shared screen doesn't affect, right? We can share the screen and it won't affect my production on the other hand. So anybody can share, like you use it as a regular Teams call, which is super cool. And the other thing that Epiphan added is the return feed. So we do have a return feed that the producer can send from Epiphan Connect. So that is super useful. To me, the delay is like barely, like it's really great to use. I really love that feature.
Yeah, I'll just comment for any on-air participant. I mean, the biggest challenge, as I think I mentioned earlier when we were chatting, Nick, is that technical debt. You know, you come in, you have a new tool, you're not sure how to, maneuver the interface, and it becomes stressful, and that interferes with your confidence, your delivery. And so, like I said, it's a familiar tool that everyone's using with Teams, even down to, as you mentioned, Jeremy, the sharing functionality. I can share my content from a PowerPoint as I normally would, and you just extract that as that separate feed. It's nice and easy.
It doesn't cause any heart attacks with any poor producers in the background. No, it's well stated. So I think we're joined by another virtual guest here that I'd love to bring into the conversation. Who do we have on deck here, Marta?
So we have John joining us, and Dan is just pulling him into the production. He's ready to go. Welcome, John.
Hi.
Happy Wednesday.
Well, yeah, I would have done my hair if I realized it was going to be on live, but
you look great. Go ahead with your question, please.
Well, my question was sort of being talked about just as I joined, because I do a lot of medical conferences, and we have to use that other company because we didn't have the tools to be able to do a decent Teams meeting and show presentation slides. And then after that, starting to persuade me that I could do this in Teams. And it's no insult of Teams. It has always been the connectivity.
Yeah, I think one of the shared content features is one of the ones that we've been most surprised by, John, and really appreciated and valued. Because it's a separated channel. So in the production workflow, the content sharing is a totally isolated feed right now that's being brought into Dan's production. And so he has the ability to kind of control that and to determine whether or not we're looking at it or we're not. And so in the case of right now, just as an example, I just actually am sharing my screen back into the Teams meeting, which is clumsy because it's a teleprompter. But what it does is it arms Dan with the ability to then share that content. If Brody wanted to share a slide about, Azure and space, which was a topic we had in the town hall, he can take over, share, throw it up. Ultimate decision making, though, goes to Dan. Dan gets to decide what he's showing, and it's not associated with the individual. It's that isolated feed.
And I think one of the biggest innovations in the Teams screen sharing, content sharing area is PowerPoint Live. Is that integration with PowerPoint where you get that kind of seamless playback, especially when it comes to videos. Because I know when Teams was first rolled out, that kind of video playback or even slide animation would have been a little bit of a problem. But PowerPoint Live has just completely flipped the switch on that and its availability. And the fact that it turns it into an SRT stream, a completely independent, controllable item for a producer, it's game changer, obviously.
Yeah, to be frank, there's a big jump between a standard meeting, whether it's on Teams or the other platforms, there's a very big jump between that standard and then just adding a few things is just such a nightmare, which is why I think a lot of people in the corporates are calling in contractors like us to do it, because it's a big jump. And I understand that the permissions issue is not so big an issue in the way that you've set this up, because that's every time I deal with a corporate and I have to talk to anything that's Microsoft, they just don't want you to connect. They won't give you an email address. They won't, obviously their security wants to be tight, but it's very difficult if you then need to go in and take control of their Teams meeting to make their experience better.
Well, I'd argue it's the same reason why a lot of those companies really value Microsoft, because it is so secure, right? So we're leaning.
It works both ways. Yeah.
So John, I think the thing that what we're really excited about is the future of workflows that we're demonstrating right now. Because you're right, there's a big gap between what I heard is there's a gap between video conferencing and live events, and we can service this but we need to service it in unique ways. Well, what's that look like? Well, that looks like leveraging the Teams rooms as studios, leveraging laptops with capture cards into pro cameras if you do need to capture that feed, using the existing corporate network that everything can be on that's robust to get those video feeds up into a virtual production environment. Connect translates Teams into isolated feeds that you can use. Unify, which is our virtual production tool, lets you create presets and branded experiences and do the switching within it. And then you can put it back into Teams, LinkedIn, or whatever plethora of spaces you want to. Also worth noting, it makes pre-records really easy in that environment. Maybe you need to bring an executive in and you want to do a pre-record. Hey, go join the nearest Teams room you've got at this time, and I'll come in and do the pre-record with you. Once we move everything virtually from a production standpoint, we remove so many of those barriers. Now, the work's still there to do the production and the layouts and the switching. That's your craft. That's your specialty. We just see this unlocking a lot of new potential events that folks historically have just relied on video conferencing, which doesn't provide the production, but they've been hesitant maybe because of the technical barriers to say, let's call in the pros. And I think that's what we're exploring together right now.
Well, I've been in all parts of the event now, and I'm very impressed. It's not difficult, but as you say, whatever the tool is, the biggest amount of work is working out who the speaker.
You know what I love
to be done whatever event you do, but when you're in the event, it's nice and easy. You just drag and drop, click and whatever, and it all flies around for you.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining, John. Dan, I'd be interested in the background. You can share with us maybe what Dan's feed was looking, or what John's feed was looking like for that. Part of what Connect provides us as a production team in the background here is access to how people's teams is performing, what their video quality is, what their audio quality is, packet loss. And what we saw with John there is, not uncommon, right? Sometimes people have dropped signals as they're going through these presentations. Part of what we do is we use Connect and the tech rehearsals to try to catch that in advance. So if you're using the tooling, what we're going to do is we're going to have you come into the call early. We're going to make sure everybody's got strong signals. If not, we're going to ask you to remove apps in the background. We're going to ask you to reboot. We're going to ask you to do a few things that will help improve that performance. Obviously, with random guests you bring on, you're always going to have that opportunity for real-time experience, which is great. It's genuine. What's next, Marta?
Yeah, I just want to thank John again for joining us there. There's a follow-up for a previous question that we had. So for the question about what the guest sees in Teams, does the guest interact via Teams or the live stream?
Yeah, so Brody, why don't you jump in? I've been talking too much.
Yeah, certainly. Well, excuse me, they'll be participating through Teams. It's, like I said, just the same as any other Teams meeting. So think about, setting up, a Teams meeting through Outlook in your calendar. You have participants join. You have your grid that displays everyone's video and their audio. And so it, as I mentioned before, it looks exactly like a regular Teams meeting. It actually is a regular Teams meeting. It's just this tooling and connector that allows us to extract from that Teams meeting. So, you know, if you watch even in that case study or some of the other examples, Nick and I recently recorded a podcast in Connect as well, where he shows the behind the scenes looking at the actual Teams meeting itself. So we have a few different resources that are really good to see what it looks like, but just to know it's the exact same thing as a regular Teams meeting. In fact, it is a regular Teams meeting.
Yeah, so all the magic happens behind the scenes on the production side. For the guest, it's just a regular Teams meeting experience. We have a question for Joe. What hardware did you use for the event?
The broadcast would have come out of the HP Slice, the Gen 2 with you know, a few of the extra pucks on top of it, probably just an ingest and a USB 3.0 upgrade on the HP Slice, which was standard at the time among all Microsoft multi-purpose rooms. Now is moved to, I believe we're doing an M70Q on the Lenovo side. But either way, the end line encoder doesn't really matter, because behind it there's like hundreds and hundreds of pounds of copper going through a full Extron control system, multiple Cisco Catalyst switches, 24 biamp TCC2 microphones on the ceiling, as well as probably 18 biamp speakers to create low levels so that it feels like the person that you're talking to is right next to you. Typical Shure wireless. I believe Brody would have been wearing one of our standard clip-on lavalier microphones from Shure, the ULX standard, as well as the gear that would have come in from Epiphan, or you guys had your own cameras and a couple things like that were going through laptops, and we were providing you audio outputs, usually through our biamp endpoints, as well as probably 30 Extron endpoints within the whole system, either decoding, encoding, or turning a camera signal into USB. So quite a lot, like a whole lot of hardware that just by dialing into a Teams call, we were able to leverage in Epiphan Cloud. You know, that kind of scale is immediately available if you have it, and all you need to do is join the meeting. The only blocker being the security of the Microsoft federated client, and somebody like Brody can just go in, add that meeting to the calendar for the room, or ad hoc join it, and then we're right in the exact same environment like I am right now.
Yeah, and one of the things that I love that you articulate there, Joe, is the details of like a lot of the AV gear that goes into those. When we say Microsoft Teams rooms, for those of you that aren't familiar with them, they really come in like 4 flavors: small, medium, large, where you're getting something out of the box, or custom. And what Joe's describing is that custom room and all that technology that was invested. Here's the thing that we could show up with, though, and Brody, maybe you can add a little bit to this, is none of that really mattered. What we knew was the room performed really well, and we were going to extract the audio and video from this high-performing room and use it for something totally different to create this show in the back end. And so that's kind of the promise here, is that if you're using Epiphan Connect and you're bringing it into a Microsoft shop, this stuff's just going to work. You're not going to have to stress out about interoperability the way you would have historically. You won't have to stress out about, how do I get my encoder on their network locally? Use their existing infrastructure, and it'll all work. The thing that we showed up with, the only piece of hardware that we showed up with from Epiphan was capture cards. And that was to take the high-end camera that we used to pick up, to really make the people on stage look good, to convert them over into a USB signal that allowed them to go back over a Surface laptop into the remote production.
Yeah, and I think one important thing to highlight there is, every production is unique and every space is unique, and there's this spectrum of, complexity and quality that tends to come with these different spaces, right? Joe, our space, very advanced. This is our brand new office in Toronto. So it's decked out with all the latest and greatest of technology, but we're, again, all in our own home studios, home offices. And so we can still deliver that quality regardless of the hardware. We can roll up or we can roll back, depending on what the space provides us.
I want to ask a follow-up with Jeremy. Jeremy, can you share a little bit about what your setup looked like in Amman?
Yeah. So like I was in Amman, I was pretty far. But my setup's pretty simple. Just one computer. I had a Mac running, and I have an extra screen for a little bit of extra space, just because of the tabs that I have. But usually I run the Unify cloud switcher. Which I get all the sources from either SRT directly from the room or from Connect, right? And I think the cool thing to mention here is the fact that let's say my internet drops, right? Dan could jump in, or George, or whoever is at Epiphan could jump in and take over, right? I could jump in on my cell phone technically and take over and start switching. It is quite hard to do that. I don't recommend it, but I've done it. So there's a lot of redundancy with that. And even if I would be in the room and lost the internet, obviously we lose everything. But now I can play a video from home. I can play something else. So the show keeps going. So I think that redundancy is really, really good. And in the past, we had like cell phone bonding, extra internet services, generator in the room. So we had a lot of redundancy. Now it's a lot cheaper with Epiphan, Unify, cloud system, and having a remote producer. So I think that's really important to mention too.
Yeah, one of the things I just want to connect back to also with John, like we mentioned this, and it's one of those features I just don't know is fully appreciated by our existing customers, that the presets, the ability to create templates for these different types of events and then just load them into your either cloud-based unified production or your physical, Perl-based encoder. But the branding, the layouts, the different templates, everything comes in, and then you're just copying and pasting and setting up your run of show, and away you go. It's that really unlocks, I think, a lot of the simplicity for the virtual producers. And as we saw with Dan earlier, it lets the one-man band really perform. And that's what we're asking here, right? Like we're taking a single person like Dan or Jeremy in the case of that, or Joe's been in that seat plenty of times, and we're saying, here we've got to operate this fairly complicated event, and we're going to do it solo, and we're going to do it with tools that are designed for it. And hopefully that comes across for those folks out there, and certainly an opportunity for all of you to play with it and go see for yourself.
And Nick, you touched a little bit on the layouts, and there's a question in regards to this. What is the limit of pictures that you can display at one time?
The limit of pictures we can display at one time. I think the layouts are fairly infinite in what we can do, right?
Yeah, I think it's pretty high. I'm not sure the exact limit.
Things are going to get weird before you hit a limit.
Yeah.
How many tiny faces looks good on a screen, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't go too far with that limit, but you can put a lot of layers on top of a lot of layers, and yeah, you can go pretty far with the Unify system for sure.
But a lot of times, like with what Brody and I did, like what you're doing is you're creating presets that are maybe just for pre-record, right? So you're just doing pre-record on your ISO channel, something we haven't talked about. All of this can be recorded in isolated channels that we can use for post-editing, right? So, Dr. Chiao told that incredible story. I don't need to be on screen for that story to resonate post-event. We can go back in, extract out that HD video that's been saved, and turn that into a snippet for social media. So that final aspect that I think you unlock with these types of workflows is that on-demand and that pre-record stuff as well, which is an interesting way to think about it.
Fantastic. So I think that's pretty much all the questions we had. We answered some of the questions via text in the Ask a Question section. So I think we're just about ready to wrap up, gentlemen.
Well, I really appreciate everybody's time, and thanks for staying on a little bit late and engaging with everybody. And Marta, thank you for pushing new boundaries with me as a co-host here. I know the bringing live people in is very hard to script, and it was fun. And I appreciate all of your willingness to try.
That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. So we have a few just final things here. First of all, you will see a button appearing below the video frame in Crowdcast. If you want to go check out the full case study about the Microsoft All Hands event, go to that link, check it out. There's a lot of really cool information there. You can sign up for a Connect demo if you'd like. We'll be glad to show you how all of that works. And if you have any more questions, feel free to email us at info@epiphan.com. We'll answer your questions, schedule a one-on-one demo, all of that good stuff. We encourage you to share this video on social. Tell your friends about it if you found it interesting. Hopefully this was fun and informative for you guys. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to our panel. This has been fantastic. Guys, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Marta.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Marta.
Let's end on that. Bye, everyone.